Good evening and welcome to the Newshour Agenda. I'm Madhavdas G. Viewers, ahead of the November midterm elections, approval ratings for US President Donald Trump have fallen to a new low, with 60% of adults in the United States disapproving of his performance, according to a new survey. About 2 out of 3 Americans disapproved of his handling of inflation and international relations. What are we talking about? This is the slippery slope that Trump appears to be on. From January to March 2025, approval ratings were at 49%. From April to June, it dropped slightly to 47%, as you can see over here. From the quarter of July to September 25, it was down to 42%. It has also, of course, remained at 42% from October to December 2025, and it has further plummeted to 40% this January. Now, the ratings may have reached an all-time low of 38% for February 26. Let's also understand why President Trump's ratings have dropped so low. The first setback is 1,000+ mentions of Trump in unsealed Epstein files. The second setback, of course, was the Supreme Court blocking key tariffs, calling it illegal. The third, as far as the Russia-Ukraine war is concerned, the deadlock continues even after 4 years and despite the promises of President Trump of ending the war. Now, this is, of course, as far as the domestic situation is concerned. Let's also not forget the fact that as we speak, Trump may be gearing up to strike Iran within the next 24 hours. There have been clear warnings from the US president that the world would soon find out whether the US has managed to reach an agreement with Iran on a renewed nuclear policy. Now, Donald Trump gave a 10-day ultimatum for Iran last week, saying that he was weighing a limited military strike to pressurize Iran. Now, this is even as talks with Tehran remain fragile, and Trump has ordered a significant buildup of forces in the Middle East, as well as preparations for a potential multi-week air campaign against Iran. Now, given that kind of a warning, if the US strikes, the wider Western world could be drawn into conflict, and the potential of the Middle East being pushed into a fresh turmoil is very much there. But the Trump administration seems to be divided on a strike Iran plan. Why is that the case? We'll tell you. Those who are against an Iran strike include J.D. Vance, who's the vice president, Tulsi Gabbard, the national intelligence chief. Those who favor an Iran strike include the joint chiefs of staff in this particular case as well as Marco Rubio, Secretary of State. Pete Hegseth, Secretary of War, is also amongst those who's favoring a strike. Debate coming up on the outside.
You're watching the News Hour at 10. Debate number 1 on Times Now, Super Prime Time.
Let's take this across to our guest now. Joining us is Sushant Sareen, Senior Fellow of the ORF. We have Burzin Wagmar, Center for Iranian Studies, SOAS, University of London. Nima Tawali is an Iranian journalist who's joining us. We have Peter Kuznick, author and Professor of History and Director of the Nuclear Studies Institute at the American University. We have Adrian Calamel, Fellow at Arabian Peninsula Institute, Terrorism and Middle Eastern Scholar. Also joining us is Mark Burns, founder of the Now Television Network. And let me start with you first. Mark Burns, what we are seeing happen domestically, is that the reason that we are hearing of all this talk and rhetoric surrounding Iran and an impending strike? Is somewhere the slipping popularity, at least if you go by these approval ratings, the reason, and the fact that you have midterm elections coming up in November, the reason for this kind of a strike happening after a series of setbacks? Mark Burns.
Well, first of all, I don't trust the polls that you're running. Let me just say that. Again, polls don't mean anything. Polls are the ones that said Hillary Clinton was going to be the first female president of the United States of America. So we don't really adhere to your polls. But let me ask you questions about Iran. Listen, the president has made it very clear he wants to make a deal with Iran. It is not the goal of the president to strike Iran. It's his deal. His goal with Iran is to do a deal. But again, he's made it very clear. Iran cannot have nuclear weapons. Iran cannot enrich uranium. Iran cannot have the ability to make nuclear weapons. And so if Iran chooses to not negotiate, chooses to not do the deal, then the president is very clear. It's going to be very, very bad. And the fact that Operation Midnight Hammer has proven that the president actually means what he says. And so it is best for Iran to take the deal, because that's what the president wants to do, is to have a deal. But if they refuse to, again, Operation Absolute Resolve and Operation Midnight Hammer.
Okay.
Both will...
Let me bring in the others as well. Peter Kuznick, Mark Burns is of the view that this has nothing to do, the domestic politics has nothing to do with decisions in relation to Iran. There was an attempt to make a deal, and of course, if that doesn't happen and if Iran does not fall in line, then of course a strike is likely. How do you look at it, Peter Kuznick?
Trump has suffered a series of defeats this past week on the tariffs, on a lot of other issues right now. He let the New START treaty expire, and he thought that putting all these armaments in the region would force Iran to capitulate. Iranians are not capitulating. Netanyahu has been here several times urging Trump to take out the Iranian government. But the Trump regime is acting in a way that has outraged most of the world right now. And so, but his approval ratings, Mark doesn't trust them, but his approval ratings have consistently been below underground. He's in terrible shape. Barely a third of the American people approve of what he's doing domestically or internationally. And that, you even get this in the Fox News polls, and the right-wing polls are all showing the Republicans are in very, very difficult straits now for the midterm elections. They'll almost certainly lose the House. They could also lose the Senate at this point. And Trump seems to be acting with complete indifference to the situation politically. And a lot of his own allies, we see the results among independents. They're so one-sided. We've never seen independents by 47% are opposed to him. So we've never seen this kind of polling before at this point. Compared to Obama, compared to George W. Bush, Trump is in a terrible position because his policies have been antithetical to what the American people want. They would like to see him focus on the economy. They don't want to see the masked thugs in the streets like that. And they don't certainly want to see the tariffs, which are raising the prices. So we're seeing one important setback after another right now.
Okay. Adrian Calamel, one setback after another, says Peter Kuznick. Do you agree with that? And that being the reason for any kind of potential action when it comes to Iran. But there's also the fact that when it comes to Iran, it's not going to be as easy as Venezuela. There's not just the fact that you have the neighbors in the Middle East who will obviously have serious problems with such a strike, and also the extent to which US can perhaps carry out a strike or any kind of military action can be undertaken. There are going to be some limitations to that as well.
Well, first of all, let me go back. Are we talking about the masked thugs in the street that just slaughtered 45,000 or 43,000 Iranians? Or are we talking, let's be honest here with ourselves here. This is a window that started 40 days ago when it started the regime mass slaughtered 40,000 Iranians, probably higher. There's 100,000 that have been injured, blinded, you name it. The regime, for all its verbosity, verbose language, its bellicose nature, we've seen that during the 12-day war that their anti-aircraft defenses do not work, that they are weak. The people who are out on the streets yesterday after the 40 days of mourning, okay, they are rising up against the government. This is a regime that is about to implode, collapse on itself. If the United States owns the skies, then the people on the streets can take back their country. And that's all the people are asking for. Now, as far as the president and making this decision, I'm glad that he's not putting politics ahead of national security, okay? He's doing what needs to be done instead of kicking the ball down the road until the next administration, when someone is in there who probably won't do what they need to do. Okay. So that is the issue there. So limited strikes. The nuclear program is probably about 18 months from being reconstituted. And also Trump put that red line in the sand. He does not want to become another Obama. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when these strikes happen.
So let me bring in some of our Iranian panelists. Niva Tewali, taking across the point that was made by the previous speaker, is Iranian regime, which is of course responsible for the tens of thousands of deaths that Adrian Calamel spoke about, brutally crushing the protests that took place. And we have seen that. I mean, now the internet is blocked. There's not much reportage coming out of Iran. But the question also is this, that would Iran be willing to take the terms that US sets when it comes to its nuclear program? And that's going to be the crux of the entire decision.
First of all, I thought this was a news show, and as such, lying to your audience shouldn't be allowed, such as claiming that 45,000 people were killed when no such evidence for that exists, when the Iranian government published the names and personal details of the 3,000 people that were murdered as a result of these of the Israeli-funded, CIA-funded and coordinated terrorist attacks, which murdered everything from nurses to attacked hospitals and so on and so forth.
There were no public protests.
The broader question, of course, is that from the coup overthrowing Mohammed
you cannot do this. You cannot just brush
aside. Yes, I can do this because if you lie,
I
shall answer. If you lie, I shall answer. You lied, and thus I answer.
There were no people. There was no problem with the regime.
You are lying.
Women were not on the streets.
You are lying to your audience,
Mr. Tavali. The world has seen what has happened. There's a limit to how much you can stretch the truth. People are out on the streets for multiple reasons, including reasons of governance, including reasons of economic, despair and financial problems over there.
The Iranian government has published the name and personal details of every person that died. In fact, the Ardennes offensive was 1 month old, was 1 month long between two armies in the Second World War, 9,000 deaths, and you're trying to push that tens of thousands of people were killed in 3 days.
Well, that is a claim made by Adrian. I asked you to respond to that claim. I don't know why you're getting so uncomfortable. May I ask you a question?
You are lying.
May I ask you a question? Nima Tavali, was the internet...
And I will not sit here...
1 second. Was the internet curbed in Iran or is it not curbed in Iran?
You are lying to your audience.
Was the internet curbed, yes or no? Just answer a simple question.
It's not a simple question, yes or no. You are lying to your audience.
Answer.
And I refuse to
either the internet is curbed or it's not.
Those lies.
Were people on the street or not?
Do you know what a debate... Do you understand how a debate works? Do you want me to answer the questions or do you want to continue talking over me?
You're not answering my question. This is not a monologue. Mr. Tavali, you are accusing everybody of lying and you're not answering the questions.
No, I'm not answering lies. I'm not.
Lies are not what is comfortable for you. Let me bring in another panelist.
Lie to your audience.
Burzin Wagmar, there's an extent to which you can stretch the truth. The previous panelist does not want to answer any of the questions posed to him. He wants to say what is comfortable to him. I mean, are we really going to now have our viewers and all the public across the world believe that there were no protests in Iran? He says it was all acts of terror.
Your previous guest is not used to debates from the world's largest democracy and people like you, Madhav, challenging him on questions. That is the Middle East and Middle Easterners for you. So let's leave that aside. Point number one. Point number two, let's really come to Iranian studies, which is what I've been invited to discuss. This Saturday past, 48 hours ago, the new academic semester started across varsities in Iran, and a fresh spate of protests broke out at Central Tehran's Sharif University, as well as the Tusi University, Northeast Tehran. And of course, we didn't see any deaths for the simple reason that security forces, as a rule, are prohibited from entering campuses. But that's only a question of time before we see what really takes place. For example, in the protests that we did see on Saturday, Ali Larijani, who has now taken a front stage position, as Khamenei is calling it a day somewhat, his son-in-law was out there mocking protesters who were protesting that we want freedom and liberty and so on and so forth, telling them to go and find the corpses of your buddies. This was Ali Larijani's son-in-law that I referred to. And on Saturday itself, also, Madhav, Iran tested a seabed missile which can take in 150 kilometers. So, yes, war is not going to break out in the next 24 hours. If you want a benchmark, and I would hazard and put my neck out, it is only when the USS Gerald Ford actually enters the theater of operations. Currently, it's still in the Mediterranean. It just entered Northwest Africa and through the Bay of Biscay on Friday afternoon. So it's going to make its way down there. As we speak, Madhav, on air, 2/3 of the US E-Sentry fleet of reconnaissance aircraft is already in the Middle East. 35% of US naval ships of 51 US ships, 35% are already in the Middle East theater of operations, and that is a third of the US Navy dispatched. And of course, this buildup is going to occur and fructify into something, because otherwise it would be a costly bluff.
Yeah.
Venezuela, as a buildup from late August to early Feb, Madhav, cost $3 billion to the US exchequer. Fat chance Trump is going to sit by and not anything come to pass. It will occur in no times to come. And as Mr. Trump has made it quite clear, more deaths will lead to something being taken in terms of action.
Right.
And Iran may say that it doesn't want to talk about ballistic missiles as part of the talks, which will again resume on Thursday in Geneva. But the question is that work has gone on since the 12-day June war in building up and concentrating on defense research equipment.
Okay.
For example, the Parchin site southeast of Tehran, where they can test mounting nuclear warheads on missiles, that has seen being kick-started into action again too. So these are very serious claims. So for now, Saudi Arabia and Kuwait may ask Trump to stay his hand, but you can be sure they'd be asking him to do something in times to come. And final point, today's Financial Times...
Just hold on to your thoughts. There's a lot of information I know you have to share. I'm just going to request a little bit of patience on your part, but let me bring in Sushant on a very important aspect that our viewers would be concerned about. Sushant, there's every possibility that Trump, who's known to ratchet up things and then do a complete flip or a complete U-turn. We saw how a few weeks ago he said help is on the way, and we know how all that ended. Now, there is obviously that possibility that US has just tried to build this up, while it's in negotiations with Iran. But if there is a strike that does actually happen on ground, how does that impact India and the entire region? Because for us, Iran is not just a neighbor, but also we are, connected through trade. Of course, there's not much oil that we're buying right now, but Jabbar, there's so much more that India has at stake over here if there is a conflict that is going to take place. Sushant.
Madhav, I don't think it's just India. I think it's the entire region. Now, there are two possibilities. One is that the Americans attack, they've got their battle plans ready, and we should all understand that the best prepared battle plans are worth nothing when the first shot is fired. And we saw that in Iraq, where the Americans went to liberate the Iraqis, killed about 1 million of them, and left the country in a mess, a bigger mess than what it was when Saddam was ruling. And Saddam was not exactly Mother Teresa. He was a pretty nasty guy. But even then, killing hundreds of thousands of people out there and destabilizing the entire region, I don't think that's the kind of liberation anybody is looking for. So let us assume that the Americans achieve all their objectives. Do they have a government in waiting? I don't think the crown prince or the former crown prince is somebody that the Iranians would accept. And I don't think there's any real opposition in Iran which will replace the current regime. So you might see an in-house change within the regime. How does that solve the problem? Second, if indeed Iran has capabilities to damage the rest of the region, then what happens? So what we are looking at is that the whole region could actually blow up, even if the Americans are able to get their objectives. So quite clearly, given the fact that we have very important security stakes in the region, we have our people, our diaspora in the region, we have our energy security, coming dependent on this particular region, trade flows dependent on this region. It's a very, very serious situation as far as India is concerned. But just one point, Madhav, frankly, if this is being done, this is a game of chicken that Trump is playing, then I think it's a game that the Iranians also playing. They're calling Trump's bluff. So either Trump will have to start a shooting match, or he'll have to withdraw after declaring victory. Second, if he is doing this because he has domestic problems, and if he starts a war which he cannot win in a specific span of time, if he starts a war, then how do things work back home? His domestic problems worsen.
Absolutely.
And if he is successful, how does it solve his domestic problems? How does it solve the tariff issues? How does it solve the inflation problems? How does it solve the immigration crisis which is out there? So I don't think anybody should wage a big war outside simply because you have domestic troubles, the war is not going to solve any which way.
Well, Sushant, you and me are not politicians. Unfortunately, politicians seem to think quite differently in terms of how they reach across to people. But let me put that question across to Adrian. Adrian, on the one hand, you have Donald Trump, who has this carefully crafted image of, somebody who's for peace, so on and so forth. Yet, he's gone and struck the Iran nuclear facilities. How is he really going to sell this as a narrative to the people of the United States if he does even manage to be successful militarily speaking? Because the domestic issues, as Sushant says, are not going to magically disappear overnight.
Well, that's a great question. And I think we should, I think that's part of why you hear the independence/isolationists try to pivot away. But I think they've all got a skin in the game when they talk about the Islamic Republic, and they don't want Trump to strike them. I'm not sure why this is. I don't expect it to be a prolonged war. Again, I think this is targeted strikes hitting IRGC components, nuclear facilities, besieged bases, some other maybe communication structure to limit the regime's communication and let the people take back the country. This is not something that falls under War Powers Act. Obama didn't go to Congress for that about Libya. And that was a multi-month campaign. And I want to hesitate. I want to not hesitate, but I want everybody to back away from the Iraq comparisons. This is a completely different situation here. This is apples to oranges. What you have is, this is an aerial and sea buildup. Iraq was a land buildup.
Okay, Sushant doesn't seem to agree with you on that count. Sushant?
So look, one, I think they talked about Libya. They went to liberate Libya also. And look what a mess they have made. Second, yes, this is probably an aerial operation. And how do you ensure that there will be regime change after such an aerial operation? Is there any guarantee? Or is the idea to break up Iran and balkanize it? What is the idea? You can't. How do you effect a regime change? A regime which is very strongly embedded. It might not be popular. I will accept that part. It might have uprisings against it. It might have major protests against it. But it's a ruthless regime which is very deeply embedded in the system, and replacing it by somebody else. How do you do it simply from air? It's not going to be possible.
Yeah.
But, if you have the power and you think you can get away with it, you go ahead, kill 100,000 people because you want to liberate a country, and then claim that somebody else killed 40,000 people, so you've killed 100,000 people. I don't see how it helps the Iranians.
Let me bring in Burzin. Burzin, I think that's a fair question because, this battle to try and restore democracy, a war for peace, so on and so forth, we've heard all these narratives for decades. And Sushant has a point because from Afghanistan to Libya to multiple countries across the world, the situation hasn't actually improved after the United States has left.
Afghanistan, Libya, Iraq were lines in the sand. Iran is a civilizational state, which is why Iraqi analogies fall apart. Point number one. Point number two, you can, up to an extent, make the case for secessionist, irredentist movements on Iran's peripheries with its Sunni minorities of the Baluchis and the Kurds and the Lurs, or even the Arabs in Khuzestan province. But no, there is a sense of the idea of Iran, and they are wedded to it, despite what their problems may have been over the last half century with this ruthless regime, that it is not going to completely rent asunder. That's number one. Number two, what happens with the revolutionary guards who call the shots and 60% of the economy and the security state? I mean, they are the state within the state in terms of what the ISI is to Pakistan. And the question is, well, not all of them are ideologues as they were of the first phase of the Iran-Iraq war about 40 years ago. Many of them are venal, corrupt oligarchs and millionaires. And they can be weaned away. They can peel away. Now, I accept, as I'm on air, the regime is still standing intact. There have been no cracks or fissures, even at the junior or the mid-level ranks. But it is a sinking ship on borrowed time.
Right.
I mean, there's only so much you can do with your people and murdering them and mowing them down in cold blood. Not to mention ecological crisis. Tehran and other parts may run out of water by October 2026, Madhav, and we haven't even come to the climate change question and the disastrous policies that are happening.
Let's not get into the realm of speculation in terms of whether there's a crack or not. Let something come out concrete, and then we can debate that. Only problem I have, Burzine, with what you said is that you're assuming that Iraq, Syria and all are not civilizational states. Now, that's something that would be very difficult to argue. But nevertheless...
But there are artificial lines in the sand. Arab states are mostly artificial lines in the sand. Iran is a civilizational state with a sense of semblance and corporate identity. No, it's not, Madhav, because there is no connection between the Mesopotamian, Babylonian period and what became Arab Iraq after 600 AD onwards, coming down to the Safavids. And Iraq was created by Churchill and company in 1922 as a line in the sand, literally out of the Ottoman provinces of World War I. It has never been a state.
Okay.
Why do you think Syria collapsed, which was created by the French in 1943?
So these are just lines the entire regimes that existed since then, they were all non-civilizational. All right.
No, they were part of Abbasid dynasties, but they were not. There is no historical continuity from the Ottomans to the Abbasids coming down to.
This is why the Middle East is so fascinating, because you have so many multiple points of view. Let Peter Kuznick come in. Peter Kuznick, do you agree with Burzine?
Okay.
Burzine knows his history. I give him credit for that. But I think the issue that we're dealing with is does the U.S. have the right to bomb and attack Iran at this moment, and what are the consequences going to be? And that's, Trump started off by talking about the government there killing protesters. Everybody's opposed to government killing protesters, but Trump doesn't care about that. Trump wanted to shoot protesters in the legs in the United States. Trump doesn't support the right to protest. He has his thugs in the street, mass thugs, repressing protests. So that's not the issue. He said that when the U.S. bombed the 3 nuclear sites back in June, that they were completely obliterated. They were destroyed. Iran doesn't have a nuclear program at this point, and they have the right to enrich. But under the JCPOA, the previous nuclear deal that Obama signed, and negotiated, that Trump blew up in 2018, they were enriching only to 3.67%, which is very, very low, nowhere near weapons grade. And now the situation is much more, precarious, because they were enriching up to 60%, because Trump blew that up. I mean, and then the question of the missiles, they're not going to give up their missiles, because that's the only thing that prevents Israel from having its way with them. You heard what Huckabee said.
Okay, let me bring in Mark Burns on that note. Mark Burns, should US be thinking of invading Iran, if at all? That's a question that's coming up, because we've seen the kind of consequences it has had in countries such as Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Venezuela even, more recently. Mark Burns.
Well, I'm going to answer your question. It's a good question, but I'm going to say this before I answer it. I've said this to your producers before. If you can have John Bolton on without a debate, you can have me on. I'm literally the only person on the show that actually communicates directly with the President of the United States of America. It's an embarrassment to me and a waste of my time to sit here on your show, wait 25 minutes to speak for 2 minutes with people who've never even spoken to President Trump, people who are guessing on what he's thinking about. I'm in Kyiv, Ukraine right now, and those Shari drones that have been manufactured by Iran is one of those reasons why, if the president, and of course the decision lies completely just with the president, if he decides to attack Iran, has nothing to do with domestic issues in America. It has everything to do with national security of the United States of America and our allies. So the reality of it is President Trump stands with the people of Iran. He always has. But the very fact that Iran is one of the most leading violators of human rights in history, of the things that they're doing to their own citizens to keep control of the people. Right now, because of President Trump, those protesters who were scheduled to be executed are now not executed. And so the president wants to do a deal. He does not want to attack Iran. He wants to do a deal. But again, we cannot have a very known enemy with enrichment uranium who will use that uranium and nuclear weapons to do harm to the West and to our allies. And so just please keep that in mind. Don't waste my time coming on the show here when there's a lot of real information, not guessing. There's a lot of real information that I can give you, but I'm not coming back on your show just to be one of the number.
Well, they are all academics. They're all experts in their own fields. I'm sorry you feel that way, Mark Burns. We did begin the debate and we're ending the debate with you. But they're all experts in their respective fields, and I think you have to give them credit for that. Let's not insult our fellow panelists as well. Let's leave it there. Sushant Sareen, Burzeen Wakbar, Nima Tavali, Peter Kuznick, Adrian Calamel, and Mark Burns. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us this evening.